I'm Morgan Bennett, 29, daughter of the late Richard Bennett who founded Bennett Technologies. Today was supposed to be my chance to save Dad's legacy at this emergency board meeting. Instead, I'm standing outside the boardroom door, face to face with my stepbrother Brandon's smug expression. "Sorry, this is for shareholders only," he sneered, blocking my path. I smiled and pulled out my phone. Perfect timing to announce who really owns this company. If you're enjoying this story so far, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let's dive into how I turned the tables on my scheming stepfamily. My father, Richard Bennett, was a brilliant man who built Bennett Technologies from nothing but an idea and $10,000 borrowed from his college roommate. I grew up watching him transform that small software startup into a $200 million company that revolutionized financial security systems. My childhood memories are filled with weekend visits to his office, where I'd sit on his lap as he explained complex business concepts in ways my young mind could grasp. My mother, Elizabeth, was his rock through those early struggling years, but cancer took her when I was only 8. Dad and I became everything to each other after that, just the two of us against the world. For 4 years, we figured out our new normal. He'd arrange his schedule to attend my soccer games and science fairs, and I learned to cook simple meals for our dinner. We were a team. That changed when I was 12, and Dad met Elaine Harper at a charity gala. She was beautiful, polished, and came with 2 children of her own, Brandon, then 15, and Ashley, 10. Dad was smitten, convinced we could become one big happy family. 6 months later, they were married, and our quiet house became filled with new voices and unfamiliar routines. I tried to welcome them, I really did. But Elaine always kept a certain distance between us, subtly reinforcing that I wasn't her child. Brandon was openly hostile, resenting any attention his new stepfather showed me. Only Ashley occasionally made genuine efforts to connect, though even those moments were tempered by her quick deference to her mother and brother's attitudes. Despite the new family tensions, Dad continued to mentor me in business. When I expressed interest in following his footsteps, his eyes lit up with pride. He encouraged my aptitude for numbers and creative problem-solving, often telling his colleagues, "Morgan has the Bennett business instinct. She sees solutions where others see roadblocks." I worked harder because of his faith in me. I graduated top of my class in high school, then earned my business degree from Wharton, specializing in finance and product development. During college breaks, I interned at different departments within Bennett Technologies, learning the business from the ground up rather than relying on nepotism. "I'm proud of you for wanting to earn your place," Dad told me during my senior year. Too many heirs expect to start at the top without understanding the foundation. After graduation, I joined the company full-time as a product development associate, eventually working my way up to creative director by 27. Dad never showed me preferential treatment in the office. If anything, he was tougher on me than other employees. But during our private dinner conversations, he would share his vision for the company's future, always with me clearly in it. Someday, he'd say, swirling his scotch thoughtfully, "This will all be in good hands." I've made sure of it. I assumed he meant my hands. I should have asked for clarification. 8 months ago, Dad suffered a massive heart attack in the middle of a board meeting. He was gone before the ambulance even arrived. The shock nearly destroyed me. One moment he was a vibrant 62-year-old with no health concerns. The next he was just gone. The reading of the will a week after the funeral felt like a second death. Elaine received 40% of the company shares. Brandon got 15%, Ashley 10%. I received Dad's house, his personal possessions, and a trust fund that ensured financial security but granted me no additional ownership in the company beyond the 5% he'd gifted me on my 25th birthday. I sat in the attorney's office in stunned silence, unable to process what was happening. Had I misunderstood all those conversations about the future? Had I somehow disappointed him without realizing it? The questions tormented me for weeks as I moved through grief like a sleepwalker. Despite my hurt and confusion, I decided to stay with the company. It was my last connection to Dad, and I still believed in the products we created. I threw myself into work, trying to honor his legacy through my contributions rather than ownership stakes. But the dynamic at Bennett Technologies shifted immediately after the will was read. Elaine took over as chairwoman, though she had never shown interest in the actual business before. Brandon, who had been languishing in middle management due to his mediocre performance, was suddenly promoted to Chief Operations Officer. Even Ashley, whose main contribution had been running the company's social media accounts, was named Director of Communications. I remained Creative Director, but increasingly found myself excluded from key decisions. At first, it was subtle. Meetings rescheduled last minute without notifying me, my emails receiving delayed responses or none at all. But as months passed, the marginalization became blatant and undeniable. "We're streamlining the decision-making process," Elaine explained coolly when I confronted her about being removed from the product development committee I had previously chaired. "Too many cooks spoil the broth, don't you think?" I could almost hear Dad's voice in my head telling me to be strategic, to pick my battles wisely. So I swallowed my frustration and focused on what I could control. I still had allies in the company and my own department to lead. I would prove my value through results, not complaints. But as weeks turned into months, it became increasingly clear that my stepfamily wasn't just sidelining me. They were systematically dismantling my father's vision for Bennett Technologies, piece by piece. By the 6-month mark after Dad's death, coming to work felt like walking into enemy territory. My stepfamily had mastered the art of professional undermining, keeping their actions just below the threshold that would justify formal complaints. Brandon became particularly skilled at passive-aggressive tactics during meetings. Whenever I presented ideas, he would sigh audibly or check his watch. "Interesting thought, Morgan," he'd say with a condescending smile. "But perhaps a bit elementary? We need solutions that address the bigger picture." He never specified what this bigger picture was, of course. The goal wasn't to improve my suggestions, but to diminish them, and by extension, me. Ashley was less subtle in her approach. She'd use the company's internal communication platform to accidentally reply all to messages, mocking my proposals. Once, after I'd spent weeks developing a new customer interface, she sent a company-wide email with a meme comparing my design to a child's crayon drawing. She apologized immediately, claiming it was meant for a private conversation, but the damage was done. My team saw their leader being publicly ridiculed by the Director of Communications. Elaine operated more strategically. As chairwoman, she controlled the board meeting schedule, mysteriously setting important discussions for times when I was traveling for business or had unmovable client meetings. When I requested schedule changes, she would express exaggerated regret. "Oh, Morgan, if only you'd told me sooner. Everything's already arranged." The isolation tactics extended beyond meetings. I was gradually removed from critical email chains and decision-making loops. Projects I had initiated were reassigned without explanation. My budget was cut by 30% while other departments received increases. Not everyone participated in this freezing-out campaign. Thomas Wright, our CFO and my father's best friend for 30 years, remained a steadfast ally. Though his power was limited against the combined voting shares of my stepfamily, he offered what support he could through private counsel and occasional intervention in meetings. "Your father would be appalled by what's happening," he told me during one of our discreet lunches off-site. "But he'd also tell you to be patient and observant. There's always more going on than meets the eye." Diana Reed, our marketing VP who had been hired by my father a decade ago, also remained in my corner. She would forward me emails I'd been excluded from and warn me about decisions being made behind my back. Her position was more precarious than Thomas's, though, as she didn't have his seniority or close relationship with the board. Through Diana, I learned about the mysterious project transition that Brandon and Elaine frequently referenced in closed meetings. Details were scarce, but it appeared to involve significant changes to the company's structure and direction. My suspicions grew when I overheard Brandon speaking with Elaine outside the executive bathroom. "Morgan's becoming a problem," he said in a low voice. "She's asking too many questions about transition." "She'll be irrelevant soon enough," Elaine replied. "Once the Reynolds deal closes, we can restructure her entire department out of existence." Reynolds Corp? I recognized the name immediately, a notorious corporate raider known for acquiring companies, stripping their assets, and discarding the hollowed-out shells. They specifically targeted family businesses going through succession challenges. The thought of my father's life's work ending up as another Reynolds Corp casualty made me physically ill. That evening, I stayed late at the office researching Reynolds Corp's history. Their pattern was consistent. They acquired controlling interest in vulnerable companies, installed their own executives in key positions, sold off valuable intellectual property, loaded the companies with debt, and then abandoned them to bankruptcy. Employees lost jobs, shareholders lost investments, and communities lost vital businesses, while Reynolds Corp executives walked away with millions. The next morning, I marched into Thomas's office with my findings. "I've suspected something like this," he admitted, reviewing my research. "But the board packets have been suspiciously light on details about this merger. Elaine keeps insisting it's still in exploratory stages, despite the fact that I've seen Reynolds representatives in the building 3 times this month." "We have to stop this," I insisted. Thomas looked troubled. "With their combined shares, Elaine, Brandon, and Ashley control 65% of voting rights. Even with your 5% and my 3%, we're nowhere near blocking position. What about the other board members? Surely they wouldn't approve selling to corporate raiders. Most of them trust Elaine as Richard's widow. And Reynolds is very good at disguising their true intentions during negotiations. They'll promise growth, expansion, retention of current management, all lies, of course, but convincing ones." I spent the next weeks trying to gather more information while attempting to rally support among senior management. But with each passing day, my isolation grew more complete. My keycard access was restricted to fewer areas of the building. My assistant was reassigned. Even longtime colleagues began avoiding me in the hallways, sensing which way the wind was blowing. The final straw came when I tried to access the company's financial projections to prepare for our quarterly review. My system credentials had been revoked. By whose authorization? I demanded of the IT manager. He couldn't meet my eyes. Orders from the COO's office. "I'm sorry, Morgan." That evening, as I sat alone in my office contemplating resignation, my phone lit up with a text from Thomas. "Emergency board meeting called for Friday morning. Reynolds Corp executives will be present." This is happening faster than I thought. They're not even telling most of the board the real agenda until they arrive. I texted back, "Will I be allowed to attend?" His response was immediate. "Elaine specifically mentioned this is for shareholders and board members only." "I'm sorry, Morgan." So that was it. In 3 days, my father's company would be sold to corporate raiders, and I wasn't even allowed in the room to witness it. All the years of work, all his dreams for the future, all the employees who trusted his vision, everything would be sacrificed to my stepfamily's greed. I left the office and drove home in a daze, rain matching my mood as it pounded against the windshield. The house, Dad's house, now mine, felt emptier than usual as I walked through the darkened rooms. I hadn't changed much since inheriting it, finding comfort in the familiar surroundings that still held echoes of his presence. That night, sleep eluded me as I tossed and turned, my mind racing with futile plans and bitter regrets. In the darkness of 3 a.m., a terrible clarity washed over me. I had failed my father. Failed to protect what he'd built. Failed to see the danger until it was too late. Unless there was something I was still missing. The next morning, exhausted from lack of sleep but driven by a new determination, I called in sick to work for the first time in my career. I needed time to think, away from the hostile environment the office had become. As I wandered through my father's house, my house now, I realized there was one space I had been avoiding since his death, his home office. The door creaked as I pushed it open, disturbing dust motes that danced in the morning sunlight. Everything remained exactly as he had left it that last morning, papers neatly stacked, his favorite fountain pen placed precisely parallel to his leather desk blotter, the worn leather chair pushed in at the perfect angle. In the months since the funeral, I hadn't had the heart to sort through these remnants of his daily life. I sat in his chair, running my fingers along the smooth mahogany desktop where he'd worked late into so many nights. What would he do in my position? He never would have let things deteriorate to this point, a voice in my head criticized. But another, kinder voice reminded me that he'd faced his own business crises and had always found unexpected solutions. Look deeper, he used to tell me during our problem-solving sessions. The answer is rarely on the surface. The antique desk had been in our family for 3 generations, a massive piece with dozens of small drawers and compartments. My father had loved its craftsmanship and history. I began opening drawers methodically, not sure what I was looking for but needing to connect with his thought process somehow. Most contained what you'd expect: office supplies, file folders, business cards. But when I pulled out the bottom right drawer, something felt off. The drawer seemed shallower than it should be, given the desk's dimensions. I removed everything, then pressed against the wooden bottom, remembering how Dad had once shown me that old furniture often contained hidden compartments. With a soft click, a false bottom released, revealing a slim space underneath. Inside lay a single cream-colored envelope with my name written in my father's distinctive handwriting. Below my name were instructions, to be opened on the day they tried to take everything from you. My hands trembled as I broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. My dearest Morgan, it began, and I could almost hear his voice reading the words. If you're reading this, then my fears have been realized, and Elaine and her children have revealed their true intentions toward you and the company. I had hoped that time might foster genuine family bonds, but I've watched how they interact with you when they think no one is observing. Their kindness is performative, their interest in your ideas dismissive. I've seen similar patterns in their other relationships and business dealings. While I've always tried to see the best in people, I'm not naive. The prenuptial agreement I signed with Elaine protected my existing assets, but required provision for her and her children in my will. What appears to be happening now is exactly what I prepared for. Morgan, you are the true heir to Bennett Technologies, not just in blood, but in spirit and capability. You understand that a company is more than balance sheets and profit margins. It's people, ideas, and purpose. That's why I've arranged for you to inherit what matters most: control. Contact Lawrence Geller at Geller & Associates immediately. He holds documents establishing a blind trust that owns 51% of Bennett Technologies' voting shares. You are the sole beneficiary of this trust, with full control activated upon delivery of this letter to Geller. I structured ownership this way for 2 reasons. First, to protect the company from exactly the situation you're facing now. Second, and more importantly, to give you time to grow into leadership through your own merit, not through inheritance. I've watched you excel in every challenge, seen your dedication to our employees, and your brilliant innovations. You've more than proven yourself ready. Remember what I've always told you: true ownership isn't about legal documents, it's about vision, responsibility, and heart. You've always owned Bennett Technologies in the ways that truly matter. Now it's time to make it official. With all my love and confidence. Dad. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face, tears of relief, of vindication, of grief for the father who had protected me even beyond death. He had known. He had seen through their facade and prepared for this moment. My hand still shaking, I called Lawrence Geller's office, only to be told he was in court all day. I left an urgent message, then paced the house, the letter clutched in my hand, alternating between elation and anxiety. What if there was some legal loophole? What if the trust wasn't properly established? What if it was too late to stop the Reynolds deal? At 7:30 that evening, my phone rang with an unknown number. Morgan? Lawrence Geller here. Just got your message. Given what you've described, I think we should meet tonight rather than waiting until morning. Can you come to my home? This isn't something we should discuss over the phone. An hour later, I was sitting in Geller's booklined study as he unlocked a safe hidden behind a painting, apparently a popular storage solution among the men in my life. He removed a thick folder stamped Bennett Trust and placed it on the desk between us. Your father established this trust 5 years ago, Geller explained, opening the folder. He transferred 51% of his shares into it, with explicit instructions regarding succession. The arrangement was completely legal, but intentionally kept confidential. Why didn't you tell me about this after he died? I asked. The terms were specific. You were to be informed only when you presented his letter, or if certain triggering events occurred, such as an attempt to sell the company without proper board review procedures. He slid several documents toward me. These establish your controlling interest, effective immediately upon your signature. And the emergency board meeting scheduled for Friday? With these documents filed first thing tomorrow morning, you'll not only be allowed to attend, you'll be able to control the outcome. He gave me a rare smile. Richard spoke of you often, Morgan. He had absolute faith in your ability to lead Bennett Technologies. He just wanted you to have the chance to establish yourself on your own merits first. As I signed the documents, I felt the weight of responsibility settling onto my shoulders. This wasn't just about thwarting my stepfamily's schemes or saving the company from Reynolds Corporation. This was about honoring my father's legacy by leading with the same integrity and vision he had demonstrated. There's one more thing, Geller said, handing me a final document. Your father recorded a video statement to be played to the board if this situation arose. The digital file is stored securely with my firm. I left Geller's house close to midnight, my mind racing with plans. I had less than 36 hours to prepare for the most important confrontation of my life. But for the first time since my father's death, I felt his presence not just as a memory, but as a guiding force, still looking out for me, still believing in me. And I wasn't going to let him down. I barely slept that night, my mind cycling through scenarios and strategies. By dawn, I was at my kitchen table with a fresh pot of coffee and a legal pad, mapping out my approach. This wouldn't be as simple as walking into the board meeting and declaring ownership. I needed evidence, allies, and irrefutable proof of what my stepfamily had been planning. My first call was to Thomas Wright. I need to see you before work. It's urgent. We met at a quiet diner far from the office, where I slid Geller's documentation across the table. Thomas read through the papers, his eyebrows climbing higher with each page. Richard, you magnificent bastard, he finally murmured, looking up at me with a grin. He outplayed them all. Did you know about this? No, but I'm not surprised. Your father was always 10 steps ahead. He tapped the documents thoughtfully. This changes everything, but we need to be strategic. If Elaine gets wind of this before the meeting, she'll try to find some way to block you. That's why I need your help. And Diana's. After breakfast, I called Diana and asked her to meet us at Thomas's house during lunch. Her reaction to the news mirrored Thomas's, shock followed by vindicated delight. I knew something was off about the way they've been treating you, she said. Richard would never have left you powerless in the company. With my 2 strongest allies on board, we divided responsibilities. Thomas would quietly gather comprehensive financial data showing the company's true value versus what Reynolds was offering, information that had been withheld from most board members. Diana would compile evidence of my stepfamily's systematic campaign to undermine me and push me out. My task was perhaps the most difficult. I needed to understand exactly what the Reynolds Corp deal entailed and how it would harm Bennett Technologies. I need access to the merger documents, I told them. Diana grimaced. Those are being kept under extreme secrecy. Even I haven't seen them. But I think I know who has, Thomas said. Zachary Miller in IT set up the secure server where they're stored. He's always been loyal to your father. Zachary had joined the company as an intern during my father's early days and had risen to head our cybersecurity division. He taught me to code when I was in high school, patiently explaining concepts until they clicked. If anyone would help me access restricted documents without raising alarms, it would be him. I found Zachary in his usual spot, the company cafeteria at 2:30 p.m., long after the lunch rush, enjoying a late sandwich while reading science fiction on his tablet. Mind if I join you? I asked, sliding into the seat across from him before he could answer. His eyes darted nervously around the nearly empty cafeteria. Morgan, I'm not sure that's a good idea. Brandon's been explicit about limiting contact with you. That's actually why I'm here. I kept my voice low. I know they've been hiding things from me, Zach. Important things about the future of Dad's company. I can't discuss. Did you know they're selling to Reynolds Corp? His sandwich stopped halfway to his mouth. How did you? I have my sources. What you may not know is Reynolds' history of destroying the companies they acquire. This isn't a merger, Zach. It's a corporate execution. I showed him articles about Reynolds' previous acquisitions on my phone, the layoffs, the asset stripping, the bankruptcies that followed. Your department would be among the first cut, I told him. Reynolds outsources all IT functions to reduce costs. I could see the conflict in his expression. What do you want from me, Morgan? I need to see the merger documents. The real ones, not whatever sanitized version they're showing the board. He hesitated, then sighed. I could lose my job. You'll definitely lose your job if Reynolds takes over. That night, after most employees had left, Zachary gave me access to a secure terminal in a rarely used server room. You have 2 hours before the system logs maintenance is complete, he warned. After that, the access records will update automatically. What I found in those files confirmed my worst fears. The merger was actually a complete acquisition with a 3-phase implementation plan. Phase 1 maintained the appearance of Bennett Technologies as a separate entity while transferring intellectual property rights to Reynolds subsidiaries. Phase 2 replaced key personnel, including every member of my creative team, with Reynolds employees. Phase 3 dissolved the original company structure entirely, moving any remaining valuable assets to Reynolds and discarding the shell. Most shocking were the personal side agreements. Elaine would receive a $5 million consulting fee for facilitating the deal. Brandon was guaranteed a senior VP position at Reynolds with a substantial salary increase. Even Ashley had negotiated a settlement. She would retain exclusive rights to the company's social media properties and client lists, which she could then sell to competitors. I downloaded everything to an encrypted drive, my anger growing with each document. This wasn't just business. This was betrayal of everything my father had built and everyone who had helped him build it. The next morning, I met with Lawrence Geller to review all the evidence we had gathered. This is more than enough to block the merger, he confirmed. The board has a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders that these side deals clearly violate. What about my stepfamily? Can they be removed from their positions? With your controlling interest, yes, but I'd advise caution. Moving too aggressively could create legal complications. Let's focus first on stopping the Reynolds deal and establishing your control. Leadership changes can follow in due course. We spent hours preparing formal documents asserting my ownership and objecting to the merger. Geller coached me on the legal terminology I would need to use and the specific procedures for calling votes. As evening approached, doubt began creeping in. Despite all our preparation, I would be facing my stepfamily alone in that boardroom. The same people who had systematically undermined and excluded me for months. People who believed they were about to secure a massive payday at the expense of the company. What if they refused to acknowledge the trust documents? I asked Geller. What if they found some legal maneuver to block me? That's why I'll be accompanying you tomorrow, he said firmly. Your father paid me very well to ensure his wishes would be carried out. I don't intend to let him down. That night, alone in my father's house, I stood in his office holding the letter that had changed everything. Tomorrow would determine not just my future, but the future of hundreds of employees who depended on Bennett Technologies. My father had prepared me for this moment, but the final step was mine to take alone. I hope I'm ready, Dad, I whispered to the empty room. The silence that answered somehow felt like confirmation. Friday morning dawned clear and bright, a sharp contrast to the storm brewing inside me. I dressed with particular care. My father's favorite navy suit of mine, pearl earrings he had given me for my college graduation, hair pulled back in a sleek chignon that meant business. When I looked in the mirror, I saw not just myself, but glimpses of him, the determined set of the jaw, the clear-eyed focus that had intimidated countless negotiating partners. Game day, I told my reflection. Lawrence Geller met me in the lobby of Bennett Technologies headquarters at 8:30 a.m., looking every inch the high-powered attorney in his tailored suit and carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my first car. Ready? He asked. As I'll ever be. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt interminable. When the doors finally opened, I spotted Thomas waiting near the boardroom, his expression carefully neutral in case of watching eyes. They're all inside, he murmured as we approached. Reynolds sent 3 executives. Elaine's been charming them for the past 15 minutes. And the board members? Mostly confused. They were only told this morning that this is about a potential merger. The full details haven't been shared. At the boardroom door, I took a deep breath, nodded to Geller, and reached for the handle, only to find my way blocked by Brandon's imposing figure as he stepped outside. His eyes narrowed at the sight of me. Morgan, this is a surprise. Is it? I do still work here, but this meeting is restricted. Board members and shareholders only. His voice carried just enough volume to be heard by those inside, establishing his authority. I maintained a neutral expression despite the anger flaring inside me. I'm well aware of the meeting's purpose, Brandon. Then you understand why you're not invited. His smirk was subtle but unmistakable as he moved to physically block the doorway. Sorry, this is for shareholders only. The moment crystallized everything. The months of disrespect, the systematic exclusion, the plot to sell my father's legacy for personal gain. But instead of the rage I expected to feel, a strange calm settled over me. I had something Brandon didn't know about. Something that changed everything. I smiled and pulled out my phone. Perfect timing to announce who really owns this company. The confusion that flashed across his face was priceless. Before he could respond, Geller stepped forward, extending a business card. Lawrence Geller of Geller & Associates. I represent Ms. Bennett in her capacity as majority shareholder of Bennett Technologies through the Richard Bennett Trust. We're here for the board meeting. Brandon's face flushed red. What the hell are you talking about? There's no trust. I've seen the will. Perhaps you should check with your legal department, Geller replied smoothly. The documentation was filed with the SEC this morning. For a moment, I thought Brandon might actually try to physically prevent us from entering, but Thomas chose that moment to intervene. Is there a problem here? He asked, his CFO authority evident in his tone. Brandon hesitated, then stepped aside with poor grace. This is irregular. Mother won't be pleased. I'm counting on it, I replied quietly as I walked past him into the boardroom. The conversation inside halted abruptly as heads turned toward our entrance. Elaine sat at the head of the table, my father's chair, flanked by 3 men in expensive suits who could only be the Reynolds Corp executives. Ashley sat nearby, looking bored until she spotted me, her expression shifting to alarm. Morgan, Elaine said with artificial sweetness. This is a closed meeting, dear. Perhaps Brandon didn't make that clear. He did, I replied, remaining standing as Geller placed his briefcase on the table. But as it happens, I have every right to be here. One of the Reynolds executives checked his watch impatiently. Mrs. Bennet, perhaps we should reschedule if there are internal matters to address first? That won't be necessary, Mr. Reynolds, I interjected before Elaine could respond. In fact, your presence is quite timely, as there are some crucial facts about Bennett Technologies you should be aware of before discussions proceed any further. Morgan, that's enough. Elaine's voice lost its honeyed tone. You're interrupting an important business meeting. Security will escort you out if necessary. Geller chose that moment to intervene, distributing folders to each person at the table. Before anyone calls security, I suggest you review these documents. They establish Ms. Morgan Bennett as the controlling shareholder of Bennett Technologies through the Richard Bennett Trust, which holds 51% of all voting shares. The room erupted in confused murmurs as board members opened the folders. Elaine snatched hers up, flipping through pages with increasing agitation. This is impossible, she finally declared. Richard left me 40% of the company. I have the will. The will distributed only 49% of the company's shares, Geller explained calmly. The majority interest was already held in trust, with specific instructions regarding succession. While the board members digested this information, I walked to the center of the room, commanding attention in a way I'd seen my father do countless times. My father, Richard Bennett, established this trust 5 years ago to ensure the company's long-term stability and success. He appointed me as beneficiary not just because I'm his daughter, but because I share his vision for what Bennett Technologies can and should be. I removed my father's letter from my portfolio and held it up. I'd like to read you part of a letter he left for me, to be opened, in his words, on the day they try to take everything from you. The room fell silent as I read the most relevant passage. Morgan, you are the true heir to Bennett Technologies, not just in blood, but in spirit and capability. You understand that a company is more than balance sheets and profit margins. It's people, ideas, and purpose. Lowering the letter, I turned to the Reynolds executives. Gentlemen, I apologize for the confusion, but there will be no merger today or any day while I hold controlling interest in this company. The lead executive, Arthur Reynolds himself, I now realized, leaned forward with the practiced calm of someone accustomed to corporate drama. Ms. Bennett, while this is certainly unexpected, perhaps we should discuss the benefits our proposal offers before dismissing it entirely. I'm well aware of the benefits, Mr. Reynolds, I replied, nodding to Thomas, who distributed our own folders containing the evidence we'd gathered. These documents detail the true nature of your acquisition plan, including the asset stripping, layoffs, and eventual dissolution of Bennett Technologies planned for the next 18 months. Board members began murmuring in alarm as they reviewed the material. I've also included information about the personal side agreements negotiated by Elaine, Brandon, and Ashley Bennett, I continued, watching my stepmother's face drain of color. Agreements that directly conflict with their fiduciary duty to shareholders and the company. This is outrageous. Elaine surged to her feet. These documents were obtained illegally. They're confidential business discussions. Actually, Thomas interjected, as CFO, I should have been included in all financial discussions regarding potential mergers. The fact that I wasn't raises serious governance concerns. Brandon, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly slammed his fist on the table. This is a trick. Some legal sleight of hand. My mother is Richard's widow. He wouldn't have hidden something this important from her, wouldn't he? I asked quietly. He certainly recognized the need to protect the company he built. A company that employs over 300 people whose jobs and livelihoods would be destroyed by this merger. I walked to the head of the table, where a laptop was connected to the room's projection system. My father also recorded a message to be played in exactly this scenario. Before anyone could object, I inserted the drive Geller had given me and pressed play. My father's face appeared on the screen, recorded in this very boardroom. Seeing him again, alive, strong, determined, sent a jolt through me. "If you're watching this," he began, "then the trust has been activated and Morgan has assumed her rightful position as majority shareholder. I established this arrangement not out of distrust, but out of prudence and love, for my daughter, for this company, and for everyone who has helped build it." He explained his reasoning for the trust structure, his confidence in my abilities, and his expectations for the company's future. Then, with the directness that had defined his leadership style, he addressed the elephant in the room. "To Elaine, Brandon, and Ashley, I provided generously for you in my will, with the expectation that you would honor the company's mission and support Morgan's leadership. If this video is being shown, you have chosen a different path. That is your right, but it cannot and will not supersede my decision regarding succession. Morgan controls Bennett Technologies now. I suggest you find a way to work together, for everyone's benefit." The video ended, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Elaine stared at the blank screen, her composed facade cracking to reveal genuine shock. It occurred to me that perhaps she truly hadn't known about the trust, that my father had recognized something in her character that I had been too young and too eager for family to see. Arthur Reynolds was the first to recover, closing his folder and signaling to his colleagues. "It appears we've been misled about the decision-making authority at Bennett Technologies. Under the circumstances, we'll withdraw our proposal." "A wise decision," I replied, though I suspect the board would have rejected it anyway, now that they understand its true implications. As the Reynolds team gathered their materials to leave, I turned to address the board formally. "I move that we reject any merger or acquisition discussions with Reynolds Corporation and reaffirm Bennett Technologies' status as an independent entity." Thomas immediately seconded the motion. "As controlling shareholder," I continued, "I call for a vote." The result was unanimous, with even my stepfamily abstaining rather than voting against. A small victory of reason, if not reconciliation. As the meeting adjourned, board members approached to congratulate me or ask questions about my plans. Throughout it all, I maintained the professional composure my father had always modeled, even as elation and vindication surged through me. Brandon and Ashley left without speaking to me, but Elaine lingered until we were nearly alone in the boardroom. "You think you've won," she said quietly. "This wasn't about winning, Elaine. It was about protecting what Dad built." "Richard always did underestimate me," she replied with a bitter smile. "And overestimate you. We'll see how long your control lasts when you have to actually run a company instead of just playing with product designs." She walked out with her dignity intact, but her words hung in the air behind her. The confrontation was over, but the real challenge was just beginning. I had claimed my place at the head of Bennett Technologies. Now I had to prove I deserved it. The hours following the board meeting passed in a blur of activity. News of the ownership revelation spread through the company at lightning speed, transforming the atmosphere from the tense, secretive environment of recent months to a buzz of speculative excitement. I sequestered myself in my father's old office, my office now, with Thomas, Diana, and Geller to address immediate concerns. "Elaine has already cleared out her personal items," Thomas reported after a quick check of the chairwoman's office. "Brandon and Ashley are doing the same." "Are they resigning?" I asked, surprised by the speed of their retreat. "Not formally, but they're making a statement. They'll expect you to fire them." I considered this. Let them stew for the weekend. We have more pressing matters to address. Those pressing matters included a company-wide email explaining the change in leadership, reassuring emails to our largest clients, and an emergency session with our PR team to prepare for potential media attention. By late afternoon, I was meeting with department heads to establish continuity and calm fears about job security. "The merger is off the table," I told them firmly. "There will be no layoffs, no restructuring for the sake of cost-cutting. Bennett Technologies will remain independent and true to my father's vision." Most seemed cautiously optimistic, though I noted the wary expressions of those who had aligned themselves with Brandon's faction. I made a point of addressing them directly. I understand loyalty, I told one such manager. But my concern is the company's future, not settling personal scores. Your performance will determine your place here, nothing else. As evening approached, I found myself alone in my office, trying to absorb the magnitude of what had happened. The trust documents lay spread across the desk, along with preliminary reports on the company's true financial position, which Thomas had been keeping separately from the versions Elaine had been sharing with the board. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. It was Diana, coat over her arm, clearly heading home, but wanting to check in first. "Quite a day," she said with a smile. "How are you holding up?" "Still processing," I admitted. "It doesn't quite feel real yet." "Well, the emails and calls I've been fielding from employees are very real. People are relieved, Morgan. There have been rumors about the Reynolds deal for weeks, and no one was fooled by the merger language. How bad had morale gotten?" "Bad enough that several key developers were updating their resumes. Your father built a culture where people felt valued. That's been eroding since." She hesitated. "Since he died, I finished for her. Since Elaine and Brandon took over." Diana nodded. "The question everyone's asking now is what happens Monday." It was a fair question, one I needed to answer for myself as well as the company. "Monday we start rebuilding. I'll need your help with that." After she left, I remained at my desk, drafting plans for my first official week as controlling shareholder. The most urgent decision was appointing an interim CEO, a role I wasn't ready to assume myself despite my controlling interest. After careful consideration, I asked Thomas to take the position. His decades of experience and unquestionable integrity made him the perfect stabilizing influence while I found my footing. "Just until we determine the permanent leadership structure," I told him when he accepted. "I have a lot to learn before I consider that role for myself." "Your father would approve of your prudence," he assured me. The weekend passed in a flurry of preparation and planning. By Monday morning, I had a clear agenda and the determination to implement it. The first test came immediately. Elaine, Brandon, and Ashley all failed to appear for work, with only Elaine bothering to send a formal email announcing an extended leave of absence. The board's reaction was mixed. Some members expressed concern about the optics of such an abrupt leadership change, while others seemed relieved that the tense family dynamic would no longer dominate meetings. "They're trying to force your hand," Thomas observed. "Make you either fire them and risk wrongful termination claims, or beg them to return and undermine your authority." "Then let's disappoint them," I replied. "Document their absence, follow HR protocols to the letter, but otherwise proceed as if this is exactly what we expected." As days turned into weeks, I established a new rhythm at Bennett Technologies. Mornings began with executive team meetings focused on unwinding the preparations for the Reynolds merger and reorienting toward growth. Afternoons found me meeting with different departments, reestablishing the open communication channels that had once been my father's trademark. The employees' response was cautiously positive. Many remembered me from my years working my way up through the ranks and appreciated that I knew their challenges firsthand. Others, particularly those hired during Elaine's brief reign, were more hesitant, watching to see if this was yet another temporary power shift. My most significant early challenge came from an unexpected source. During my second week, I discovered that Ashley had been systematically downloading client information and communication strategies before her departure, corporate espionage that could damage us significantly if the materials reached competitors. After consulting with legal counsel, I made the difficult decision to pursue the matter formally. We sent a cease and desist letter and threatened legal action if the materials weren't returned and all copies destroyed. Ashley's response was immediate and vicious, a social media campaign painting me as the villain who had stolen her mother's rightful place in the company through legal trickery. The posts gained traction among her followers, creating a minor PR crisis that distracted from our rebuilding efforts. "Let me handle this," Diana advised. "A direct response from you only adds fuel to the fire." She crafted a measured public statement emphasizing the company's focus on innovation and service, while our legal team quietly gathered evidence of Ashley's data theft. When presented with this evidence, Ashley's attorney recommended she comply with our demands and cease her public attacks. The crisis subsided, but the personal sting lingered. "I really thought she might be different from them," I admitted to Thomas over a late working dinner. "When we were younger, before all this, she sometimes seemed to actually want a sister relationship." "Power and money change people," he replied. "Or more accurately, they reveal people's true priorities." Meanwhile, I focused on what had always been my strength: product innovation. The creative department I had built was demoralized after months of having their ideas dismissed and budgets cut. I threw myself into revitalizing their enthusiasm, restarting the development of our next-generation financial security platform that had been shelved under Brandon's leadership. "We're implementing Project Phoenix," I announced during an all-hands meeting 6 weeks after taking control. "The enhanced security architecture we've been developing for the past 18 months will become our new flagship product." The name was deliberate, a symbol of the company's rebirth from the ashes of what might have been. The project had been my passion before my father's death, combining breakthrough encryption technology with user-friendly interfaces that had the potential to revolutionize how small and medium businesses protected their financial data. Brandon had dismissed it as too ambitious and not market-ready, redirecting resources to more incremental improvements that would be easier to package in the Reynolds sale. Now, with proper support and funding restored, the development team attacked the remaining challenges with renewed vigor. Not everything went smoothly, of course. Some days I found myself drowning in the sheer volume of decisions requiring my attention. Other days, imposter syndrome would strike without warning, leaving me questioning whether I truly had the skills to lead a company of this size and complexity. During one particularly difficult week, when a major client threatened to leave and production issues delayed a software release, I found myself alone in my office late at night, staring at my father's photo on the wall. "I don't know if I can do this, Dad," I whispered. But the next morning, I found solutions for both crises, drawing on resources I hadn't known I possessed. The client stayed, the software shipped, and I discovered that leadership wasn't about having all the answers. It was about creating an environment where problems could be solved collectively. 2 months after the boardroom confrontation, we had our first major win. The Phoenix platform demo at the National Financial Security Conference generated extraordinary buzz, with industry analysts praising its innovative approach and ease of implementation. Orders began pouring in, validating my faith in the product and the team that had created it. "This is what Richard always envisioned," Thomas told me as we celebrated with the development team. "Not just successful products, but innovations that genuinely improve how businesses operate." As the company stabilized and began to thrive again, I gradually worked through the emotional aftermath of the confrontation with my stepfamily. Brandon eventually submitted a formal resignation, accepting a position with a competitor that promptly went nowhere. Elaine pursued a settlement, which after careful consideration and consultation with the board, I approved, buying out her shares at fair market value to eliminate ongoing tensions at board meetings. "Are you sure about this?" Geller asked when I instructed him to prepare the agreement. "You don't owe her anything. This isn't about what I owe her," I explained. "It's about freeing the company from a toxic influence and letting us all move forward." The most meaningful affirmation came 6 months after taking control, when I presented our quarterly results to the board. Revenue was up 22% year-over-year. Our client retention rate had improved from 78% to 94%. Employee satisfaction scores had returned to pre-Elaine levels, and the Phoenix platform was exceeding sales projections by almost 30%. As I concluded my presentation, the board member who had been most skeptical of my leadership, a conservative investor who had initially sided with Elaine, cleared his throat. I think I speak for all of us when I say that Richard would be extraordinarily proud of what you've accomplished, Morgan. You've not only stabilized Bennett Technologies during a period of potential disaster, but you've positioned it for growth beyond what many of us thought possible. That evening, I visited my father's grave for the first time since the funeral. I brought a small bottle of his favorite scotch and 2 glasses, pouring one for each of us as the setting sun bathed the cemetery in golden light. We did it, Dad, I said softly, touching my glass to the one I'd placed on his headstone. Bennett Technologies is safe, and it's growing again. I wish you could see it. As twilight deepened around me, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced since before his death. The company was secure. The employees were protected. His legacy would continue. And I had finally found my own place within that legacy, not just as Richard Bennett's daughter, but as a leader in my own right. A full year after the boardroom confrontation that changed everything, I stood at the podium during our annual company celebration, looking out at the faces of the Bennett Technologies family. Some were familiar from my childhood visits to Dad's office. Others had joined during my own leadership. All were now part of a thriving enterprise that had not just survived a near disaster, but emerged stronger for the experience. When my father founded this company 27 years ago, he had a simple but powerful vision to create technology that made people's lives better within a company where people were valued for their contributions rather than their titles. Today, we're not just honoring that vision, we're expanding it. The past 6 months had brought steady growth and innovation. The Phoenix platform had become the industry standard for financial security, earning prestigious awards and driving record profits. We had opened a new development center, created 43 new jobs, and implemented the employee profit-sharing program my father had always talked about but never quite finalized. After my speech, as employees and their families enjoyed the celebration, Thomas approached with a glass of champagne. Richard would have loved this, he said, nodding toward the crowded room. The company's strong, the future bright, and his daughter at the helm. Everything he wanted. Almost everything, I replied. There's still the family aspect. Despite the professional success, my relationship with my stepfamily remained complicated. After the initial confrontation and legal settlements, we had maintained a cool distance. But recently, I had begun considering whether perpetual estrangement was truly the best outcome. 2 weeks after the company celebration, I took a step that surprised even myself. I invited Elaine to lunch. We met at a neutral location, an upscale restaurant halfway between her new home and the office. The initial awkwardness was palpable as we exchanged stilted pleasantries and ordered our meals. Finally, I addressed the elephant in the room. I didn't ask you here to rehash the past, Elaine. What happened, happened. But I've been thinking about what Dad would want now, and I don't think it's this ongoing Cold War. She studied me with a calculating gaze I remembered well. What exactly are you proposing, Morgan? Not a business arrangement. Not a pretense of mother-daughter bonding. Just peace. An acknowledgement that we're connected through Dad, whether we like it or not. And Brandon and Ashley? The invitation extends to them as well, though I suspect Brandon may be less receptive. Elaine sipped her wine thoughtfully. He took the Reynolds collapse personally. His position there didn't materialize as promised. And Ashley, she's engaged. Moving to California with her fiancé. Elaine hesitated before adding, she asks about the company sometimes. I think she regrets how things ended. Our conversation remained carefully civil, touching on neutral topics and cautiously navigating around the still tender areas of the past. We didn't leave as friends, but perhaps as something slightly warmer than adversaries. It was a beginning. Brandon, as predicted, rebuffed my olive branch, though his circumstances had humbled him somewhat. The competitor that hired him had downsized his department 6 months later, and he was now working for a much smaller firm with considerably less prestige. Our paths occasionally crossed at industry events, where we maintained a minimal professional courtesy. Ashley proved more receptive. Before her move to California, we met for coffee, where she offered an awkward but seemingly sincere apology for the social media campaign against me. "I got caught up in Mom and Brandon's narrative," she explained. "It was easier than forming my own opinion. We all make choices based on the information and emotions we have at the time," I replied, thinking of my own journey. "The question is what we learn from them." These tentative steps toward family reconciliation were important, but they were secondary to the profound personal growth I had experienced over the past year. Leading Bennett Technologies had transformed me in ways I hadn't anticipated. I had learned to trust my instincts while remaining open to guidance. I had discovered reserves of strength and resilience I never knew I possessed. Most importantly, I had found my own leadership style, different from my father's in many ways, but rooted in the same core values of integrity, innovation, and genuine care for people. The greatest validation came not from financial statements or industry recognition, but from the culture we were rebuilding. Employees once again felt ownership of their work and pride in the company's mission. The toxic environment of secrecy and favoritism that had characterized Elaine and Brandon's brief reign had been replaced by transparency and merit-based opportunities. On the anniversary of my father's death, I instituted the Richard Bennett Innovation Grant, an internal program that funded employee ideas that might otherwise be considered too experimental for traditional development channels. The first recipient was a junior programmer whose concept for adaptive security protocols would eventually become our next breakthrough product. "Your father would approve," Diana told me after the grant announcement. "He always said the best ideas rarely come from the top of the org chart." "I'm just trying to create the company he envisioned," I replied. "No," she corrected gently. "You're creating the company you envision. And that's exactly what he would want." Her words stayed with me, sparking a realization that had been forming gradually over the months. I had spent so much time trying to honor my father's legacy that I hadn't fully acknowledged how that legacy had evolved in my hands. Bennett Technologies was no longer just my father's company. It was becoming mine as well, shaped by my own ideas and values. This insight led to perhaps the most important decision of my leadership so far. After careful consideration and consultation with the board, I officially assumed the role of CEO, with Thomas transitioning to chairman of the board, where his experience and wisdom would continue to guide us. My first act as CEO was to formalize something I had been practicing informally, a leadership approach centered on earned authority rather than positional power. True ownership isn't about legal documents, I reminded my executive team, echoing my father's words. It's about vision, responsibility, and heart. This philosophy extended beyond the executive suite to every level of the company. We implemented collaborative decision-making processes, transparent communication channels, and meaningful recognition systems that acknowledged contributions throughout the organization. The results spoke for themselves. Employee retention reached an all-time high. Innovation accelerated as people felt safe proposing unconventional ideas. Our reputation in the industry shifted from solid performer to leading innovator, attracting top talent and exciting partnership opportunities. 18 months after the boardroom confrontation, I stood in my office, still my father's office in many ways, though now bearing touches of my own personality, and reflected on the journey. The company was thriving beyond my most optimistic projections. The team was energized and aligned. And I had found my place, not as Richard Bennett's daughter who inherited control, but as Morgan Bennett, a leader who had earned the right to guide the company forward. The most profound lesson of this journey wasn't about business strategy or corporate governance. It was about believing in yourself even when others don't, about finding the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it seems impossible. My father had given me the tools and opportunity, but the strength to use them had come from within. As I prepared for a board meeting where we would discuss international expansion, a dream my father had never quite realized, I touched the photo of him on my desk and smiled. "We're just getting started, Dad," I whispered. That afternoon, as I confidently led the board through our expansion strategy, I embodied the truth I had discovered through this entire experience. Sometimes, the most valuable inheritance isn't what's written in legal documents, it's the belief someone has in you, and ultimately, the belief you develop in yourself. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself when others tried to push you aside? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the hardest battles lead to our greatest victories. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share with someone who might need a reminder that they're stronger than they know. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your true worth is never determined by those who underestimate you.